Good afternoon or good evening, wherever you may be listening to us from here on this big, beautiful world we call Earth. This is Michael Cross here with another edition of Unlock the Door Radio here on UCY TV Productions, where we strive to dig way deeper than you're going to see in the analysis, or if you can call it analysis, in mainstream media. Okay, before I begin, I just have to do that little plug here in that spirit of Edward Bernays. And that is, if you're listening to us via YouTube later after the broadcast, be sure to click on my subscription and also click on my website. You'll see the links on the YouTube video. Anyway, what inspired tonight's show was, of all things, I saw a clip. It's not the first one, but I saw a clip of a person with a Trump hat, and they were being assaulted by a group of people. I guess they didn't really like the fact that this guy was expressing his freedom of speech and had a Trump hat on. And the thing is that this isn't the first time, and I think that there's an explanation for this. And that is an aspect of human behavior that our founding fathers recognized and try to protect against, and that is the fear of mob rule. Now, mob rule, sometimes you think of this thing where, a bunch of bad people get together and do bad things. However, I've actually seen interviews with people who looted and rioted, like during the Rodney King situation in the early 90s, did nasty things, and then they're interviewed and they seem like really normal, decent people. And you're probably thinking, what? How can they do such how can you say that they sounded like normal, decent people? And there's an explanation, and it's called ego projection. Sigmund Freud talked about this, especially in some of his works like Civilization and Its Discontents. You see, an individual, a person, one person, is going to be their ego is going to be based on their upbringing, the values they've been taught. And when they're alone, or I guess in a very small group generally, but let's just say alone, when they're alone, they're personally accountable. And so therefore, if they violate the norms they've been raised with, such as thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not rape, thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not, on and on and on, then they will probably act in accordance with that. They won't violate those norms that are part of who they are. And that usually keeps people's behavior pretty good. And I really do believe very much that human beings, if we try doing some sort of judging, are humans naturally good or are they naturally bad? Of course, that throws in our personal preferences for what we call good or bad. But I say overall, when it comes to such actions as compassion, an individual human being is a pretty good person. The danger, and this is the irony of ironies when it comes to the way we see civilization and its evolution. The irony is that the bigger the group gets, the more potential danger it poses in regards to violence and doing despicable things. Now, the thing is, I think in our society, and then I'll go into Freud a little bit more. I think in our society, we have this modern notion that we started off really, really primitive in small, violent groups. That's like a Hobbesian thing. And where nature gave us short lives and they were brutal. And we were fighting all the time. And, these caveman movies and stuff like that seem to reinforce this idea. However, my understanding is that when you study small groups of people that are still living in isolated, primitive conditions, and you also study the history of groups that did live in primitive, isolated situations, they were generally fairly peaceful. They didn't engage in a lot of war. And the thing is, when you're in a small group, there's two things that can happen that will actually minimize war. And that is, A, you don't want to lose any of your kin, because these are people that are probably closely related to you, or at least they're close enough that you have this identification with them that's very important. And two is, there's probably lots of resources around, so why do you want to go out and rob someone else of their resources? I mean, in reality, small primitive tribes, if they do get in squabbles with each other, it's usually over someone getting in a fight and then someone else, kind of a Hatfield-McCoy type of thing. But as civilizations grow, then it's easier to do the ego projection. Now, like I said, Freud talked about this in the sense that he was actually quite pessimistic about humans and their ultimate survival as a species. But he felt that when you get people together, then what it turns into is a group mind. People start giving permission to one another. Now, let's take a look at our poor, hapless Trump supporter who found himself in a crowd of people who didn't like Trump. Individually, the worst thing that might have happened was an argument with one of these people. But when you have a collective, when you get a group of people, it acts more stupid, because everyone starts looking to each other to give permission to do nasty things. And that is part of our nature, actually. Now, I'm not one that's going to be talking about us coming from chimps or something like that. But if you take a look, not at the bonobo chimps, but regular chimps. Bonobos are an exception. They're a subspecies of chimp. They're pretty peaceful. They just sit around eating fruit and having sex with each other all day. But if you look at most chimps, we see them in the circus. They look cute and funny when we dress them up, but they're actually quite vicious creatures. And contrary to what most people believe, they are omnivores, just like humans. They eat vegetable material and they eat meat. And I watched this documentary one time where it shows a group of chimps, and they've cornered some monkeys. That's one of their favorite foods. They cornered some monkeys, and several of them had grabbed a monkey, and they were playing. And what they were doing was they were yanking the arms and legs off of this monkey, and they seemed to be really having a great time as they were doing it. And the thing is that, humans, there actually are some games from the Middle East where you play a game where you do something similar to that with a goat. Or at least in the Near East, Afghanistan, one of those countries, their traditional game. But the thing is that humans have this kind of thing too, where if you're not being held accountable, if everyone's doing it, then you have a situation in which people are no longer personally responsible. They're no longer personally accountable. And so therefore they will do nasty things. And that's why the Founding Fathers wanted to guard against mob rule. Because you get some horrible situations. I watched a video where a woman, I think it was in Afghanistan, she was accused of trashing a Quran or something like this. And this big crowd just goes after her. And they beat her, and finally, if I remember right, they stoned her a bit, looked like she was dead, and then they just set her on fire. Now, these individuals, as one, probably wouldn't have done that. In fact, I would speculate that in the Bible, where it talks about stoning, that it was always a group affair. It wasn't one person. In fact, when you had that situation, I think a lot of people miss this here because they're talking, they're usually talking about, sin and judgment. But in the situation where Jesus confronts the mob that are going to stone a woman for adultery, and he holds a rock up and says, well, he who is without sin cast the first stone. The thing is, that made everyone accountable individually. It was no longer a group thing. And therefore, everyone just kind of turned and, walked away and went back to their work or families or whatever. And I think that when you see these videos out there where you see stoning taking place in various parts of the world and so forth, it's always a big crowd because the individual would not do that. Yeah, for the most part, most individuals, if you stick them into a situation and you say, okay, you're the executioner, here's a rock, there's the, woman caught committing adultery, and now it's up to you to stone her to death. I think 99.99999% of the people, even if they feel this is a justifiable thing as a punishment, are not going to want to do it alone. Okay? It's not going to be very pleasant to face someone alone. It's the same thing with the Marshall surveys that were done in World War II, where human beings, 90% of the soldiers that were on the front line against the Japanese and the Germans did not actually fire on the enemy. They fired above their heads. They fired in, just whatever, just didn't shoot. 10% were actually doing all the shooting. And that's because humans are programmed not to want to hurt people. Okay, so that's part of yes, we are nice. We, even animal species, when they're fighting for mates, they hit the other, like two males, they will fight each other to where there is a victor, but the other one gets to walk away most of the time. And we're just programmed not to want to hurt someone. Now, when you're in an airplane and you've got, an atomic bomb and you push a button, or if you're a drone operator somewhere and you don't see people's faces, it makes killing much easier. And also, you're being told it's the right thing to do. You're being commanded. So in other words, it's not your responsibility. Your ego projection is towards your commanding officer. And his ego projection is to the person higher than him and all the way up to the president. So they have the responsibility. It's like the Milgram experiments where, these people actually thought that they were shocking someone for making mistakes on a test. Well, they weren't really shocking someone. It was fake. These people were not really wired to any kind of electrodes. But most of these people, when the researcher or the guy in the white coat would say, okay, well, he got the wrong answer, give him a shock, they went into lethal dose. They may have questioned it, but then when the researcher's going, hey, you don't have responsibility for this, I assume full responsibility, they were willing to push the button even when the guy was no longer making a noise, no longer screaming in there. So you assume that, hey, he might be dead or in a coma or something. Nope, you keep pushing the button because, you're not wanting to disappoint the authority figure. Now, if you were like kidnapped by a serial killer and the serial killer says, well, push this button and electrocute this person, you might resist, unless you do it for fear of your life, but you might resist. Now, because you're not going to consider the serial killer to be an authority versus the person in the lab coat you consider an authority. But again, whether it's the authority of the state, an educational institution, or just the mob, there is this sense of I'm not responsible. I don't have to worry. So, could some of these people that were beating up the Trump supporter, might they, in a different circumstance, if you could just grab one of them and introduce him to the Trump supporter and say, hey, this is this guy here, introduced, you find out each other's names, maybe say something about, hey, you find out you went to the same high school. All of a sudden, whoa, there's a connection. Or maybe you find out that you're of the same ethnic group or religion. You might be of the same religion. You might have certain interests that are the same. And you'd be eating dinner with this person, sharing an ice cream or something like that. But when it's a group thing, you don't think about that guy with the Trump hat as being an individual. All of a sudden, he is he is representing Donald Trump. And the media has so poisoned the well, so to speak. They have so vilified Trump that it's almost as if the old witch hunt days. Remember those days? Yeah, well, you probably don't remember them. But the thing is that in the witch hunt days, a lot of us forget the fact that these were generally carried out in small communities. I mean, Salem, Massachusetts, back in the 1600s or early 1700s or whenever they took place, was a small community. Everyone knew each other. A lot of people were related to each other. I mean, if you have a small community and a couple generations, pretty much everyone's intermarried. It's Game of Thrones time. But the thing is that in these villages around northern Europe and northwestern Europe, where they had a lot of witch trials and stuff, the people knew these, and primarily women, that they were setting on fire. And it might even be your cousin as you're watching her burn to death, or be strangled or hung or something like that. But the thing is that the group has said it's okay to do. And because this person is evil. This person slept with Satan. That used to be a major crime, that they would list. This person has what do they call it? Fornicating with the devil. This person has my gosh, it sounds like a rock music song. But anyway, this person has done some sort of horrible deed connecting themselves to Satan. Well, then they're punishable. But it's not just one person. It is the community. They look at each other. Well, I guess she's guilty. Okay, set her on fire. Watch her burn. And even as she's screaming there, burning to death is probably not the nicest way to go. She's probably watching, her friends and family, and some of them are probably cheering on the burning. And the thing is that the media has so vilified Trump that people now accept a lot of these notions. A guy shared on my Facebook today. I guess he's an uncle-in-law. But he my wife's uncle. But he shared this post, and it was comparing Hitler to Trump. Now, I don't care where you stand on Trump, okay? Whether you love him, you hate him, you're in between somewhere, like a lot of people are. But comparing Hitler to Trump is part of what has poisoned the well, to that point that you start looking upon anyone who would support him as being some sort of neo-Nazis that are out to kill people and do great evil. And of course, we watch movies all the time. I think World War II movies have been the #1 genre of movie ever made. Used to be a few years ago, it was like World War II or Westerns. But Westerns kind of fell out of favor in the around the mid-'70s. And then you still had the World War II movies. And most of the World War II movies involved the war with Germany. And so the Trump supporter starts taking on the image. The Trump supporter could be black. The Trump supporter could be Jewish. The Trump supporter could be any number of these groups that you wouldn't really expect to be members of the KKK or the Nazis or something like that. But your subconscious mind, at least these people, their subconscious mind is saying this is who this person represents. So therefore society, the media, has given permission ever so subtly, or sometimes not so subtly, to go and do something about this person. So that explains why you see these situations. Like I saw one time when this girl was being pelted. She was trying to get into this building where there was a Trump meeting taking place. She looked like she was maybe 5 foot tall, and and she stood her ground, but she was getting spit on and all this kind of stuff. And the thing is, that reminds me too. I remember I once went to, it was either a George Bush or Ronald Reagan. I don't know. Well, it was when I was in college. Speech, and outside there was a big bunch of protesters, and there was like some high school girls that had some signs that were in favor. I think it was Bush. I'm just trying to remember. I don't remember. Anyway, they had some signs out for Bush, And these peace protesters started throwing dirt and rocks at them. And I was thinking, oh, that's kind of ironic. But no, it isn't, because the peace protester has so personified the idea that anyone who would support in those days, old man Bush or Reagan, personified so much that they want to nuke the world and destroy the world and do all kinds of evil, then his surrogates or minions, even though they might be like 15-year-old girls, that took the day off from high school to come to this thing, all of a sudden they are no longer 15-year-old girls. They are agents of evil in that person's mind. So when we're looking at these situations where people are doing this, and you look at the comments underneath where people are saying, oh, we should have shot them all, or, someone should just shoot these people down, I would disagree, okay? I don't think that's the right thing either. Or then pretty soon we're going Somali style and warlords and, that sort of thing. But the thing is, we have to understand what has made this election so different, because I don't think this was really happening to this degree with Mitt Romney when he was running in 2012 or John McCain in 2008. But this election has been one in which everything's almost a cartoon caricature, okay? And so, people start making fun of Hillary Clinton's health problems. Kind of like, you see comments all the time like, oh, I hope she just dies on stage or something like that. You're like going, well, wait a minute, you don't really want that to happen. I hope not. And then you get people that are, cheering on the Trump people getting harassed and so forth. It's almost, oh my gosh, it's like the arena games. It's like the arena games where, now most of the time gladiators did not fight to the death. Okay, that's a myth. These were expensive guys. These were like taking football draft picks and fighting them to the death. You didn't want to do that. But they did have exhibition games where they did, bring gladiators out to kill criminals or political or religious dissidents and that sort of thing. And the people cheered because their idea was these criminals or whatever, that they're evil, so they deserve to die. And so when the gladiator would cut their heads off or stab them with a trident or something like that, there would be cheering. Because, and again, I've been to the Colosseum in Rome. That thing's huge. You can imagine what it would be like if it's all filled with people and you still had like it was closed at the top. It looked like a modern sports arena. Okay? And the thing is, if you had all of this going on and people selling just like sports today, you had people selling treats and desserts and stuff like this to the spectators. This was like this carnival atmosphere. Now the thing is, you ask people, would you watch a gladiator game if you suddenly had a time machine and you could go back to 2,000 years ago and watch gladiator sports? Would you do it? Most people as individuals say no. But then if you ask a group and suddenly one or two hands go up, I've always noticed that one or two hands go up, all of a sudden half the group's hands go up. Okay? Because all of a sudden you're seeing that, hey, she would go watch one? Well, I would too. Yeah, that would be fun. And this explains this mob mentality where people are hurting people for no reason. They're just being cruel. And, this is something we got to watch out for, because whoever wins the election, the political soup, so to speak, has been toxified. And we're going to see a fracturing of people more into their various ethnic, religious, social, economic, racial groups. And we don't want that, because if we start seeing this, we're going to start seeing people feel like they're justified to lash out at members of other groups. And, this has happened throughout history, and it's never turned out good. But again, It's not, it's explainable in that sense that one person, wonderful. 100 people, give them the permission. The lights go out, people start breaking something. One person breaks something, all of a sudden everyone's grabbing themselves a new computer or flat screen TV from the stores on that block. And even if you've ever been in a school situation when the lights go out, everyone starts acting really weird and everything. Again, it's a mob thing. If you were like 2 or 3 people and the lights go out, it's like, oh, that's weird. Let's try to find some light around here. So we need to pull back and also, actually, I'll say this. The media has to take responsibility for their role in this. Now, sure, there is a lot of people out there on blogs and discussion forums and responses to newspaper articles, and they're all going, oh, I hate these people. These are despicable people. I hate, blah, blah, blah. But when you have, that's to be expected. There's always going to be rabble-rousers who are going to say stuff like that anonymously. But when you've got the media, practically putting, horns on Trump, and, when you have stuff going around, like memes that associate Trump with Hitler, I've always thought, I actually responded to my uncle-in-law, and I said, I wonder how Trump's Jewish family would feel about this meme. I don't think they'd be very happy about it. But he didn't respond to that, obviously. But the thing is that we need to realize when your society, whether it's if we look at dictatorships, it happens. When dictatorships have said these people are targets, then normally decent people will go after people that maybe they knew when they were younger or still know and do nasty things.
What I'd like to go over right now, though, very, very important issue, is why people are turning away from the mainstream traditional media. That's right. Those big name networks that you may have grown up with. Well, if you grew up in America, you grew up with them. The big newspapers and so forth. What we now call essentially an oligopoly. Not a monopoly. There's more than one source. But now we have, 6 sources? Big, giant media conglomerates. If you want a breakdown of these, just go to PBS Frontline, The Merchants of Cool, and Media Giants. And you'll see exactly what the state of affairs are for today. Well, anyway, what I'd like to deal with, though, is why people are turning away from it. Why people are giving the proverbial middle finger to the mainstream media. And there's a lot of reasons that you could go into that involve technology, the internet, and so forth, and I will touch on those. But I think actually what it boils down to is a huge disconnect. Okay? There is a massive disconnect between the reality of the average person's life, the average American's life, and the same is true for Europe and so forth. The average person's life is disconnected from the media when it comes to the values, when it comes to the monetary resources, when it comes to the ideals of what these people want for the future. There is a big difference between a person living in Orem, Utah, or Des Moines, Iowa, or Tallahassee, Florida, or any of these kinds of communities, and those people that put out your media, which generally emanates from 2 sources, really, New York and Los Angeles, with everything else being the flyover. Okay, the flyover territory for many of these kinds of people who put out what you're supposed to think. That's right. When they come on and they're reading the teleprompter, they're trying to get you to think a certain way. And, they say there's always 2 sides to every issue. Mm-mm. No, there are many more than two sides to every issue. There are many more than two sides. The media likes to create a situation in which there's either product A or product B, like you're selling a soda or a fast food restaurant, without actually asking the question, what about the other products? Or is what they're talking about even what should be the priority of discussion within the national consciousness? Now, let me go into some examples here just to illustrate the bias of the media. And my gosh, in this election here, I don't care whether you're a Bernie Sanders supporter, Jill Stein, Donald Trump, or Hillary Clinton. You can see the bias. All right? It is so evident. It's in your face. Okay? If you're Jill Stein, you're not even talked about. If you were Bernie Sanders during the primaries, again, you were marginalized by this media that was very much for Hillary winning the nomination. And now you can see it when it comes to Trump. But before I get to Trump, I want to say something about Russia. You know, I saw an article recently. It was called, I'm paraphrasing this. It was called Everything, and this was in a mainstream newspaper too, which was really ironic. But sometimes they get it right. Rarely, but sometimes. And it was saying that everything you're being told in the media about Syria is a lie. Okay? And I forwarded this to someone I know who's Syrian. And sure enough, she's like, yeah, everything said in that article was true. And it was saying that the narrative that's coming out from the U.S. government is a lie. And the media, now this person seemed to have a more positive attitude towards the media's intentions, said that nowadays most of the media has cut back on its staff. And so they get they don't send out people anymore, where you, like in the Vietnam War, where you had thousands of correspondents sent out to find out what was going on. Now you just rely on stuff from, the State Department. And maybe some of the big newspapers will publish an article and it just goes out and everyone just accepts it, whether it's true or not. And the thing is that this means that people will only read a certain aspect of a story. Now, beyond that, I've talked to a lot of media people, and I've had confrontations with media people. I've been involved in politics quite a bit. And, I remember one time I talked to a newspaper editor when an article had appeared that I challenged him. I went in and challenged him about this. And he admitted, okay, I know that this is not right. I know that this was incorrect. But the stuff that you're talking about is in like the 6th or 7th paragraph, and no one reads that much. He was actually being honest. Most people read the headline, and then there's a smaller number that read the first paragraph. Second, each paragraph, you see a huge decrease in the amount of people reading it, to where when you're at the very back of the story, if someone's actually read the whole thing, it's only a tiny, tiny minority that will read that. So actually where you place your information that might show the other side is, it might be on page 2 of a page 1 story, and it might be like the 12th paragraph on page 2. Well, yeah, you're showing that there's more than one side, but it's not getting out to anyone. No one's reading that far. They've already stopped. And the only people reading it are the political junkies or the person that's very, very, very interested in the story, and no others. The impression, though, that it's leaving on on the headline, the picture, and the first couple paragraphs are everything. And this is really, oh my gosh, when you read stories, I get this. I just looked through and read a bunch of the descriptions of Russia, for instance, when it comes to Syria, and what Russia's doing in regards to the Syrian campaign, which I will note, it seemed like everything was stalled and ISIS was on the way to taking over big amounts of Syria and also in the process Iraq too. And all of a sudden Russia gets involved in it. America had been involved for a year, allegedly bombing ISIS. And all of a sudden, ISIS is on the run. All of a sudden, they're in a desperate situation. Why is it? Why is it that when Russia got involved, there was a sudden change? But yet, is Russia being thanked? Well, maybe by Trump, but not by the mainstream media. No, Russia's still the demon. Russia's still the bad guy. In fact, now you've got stories about maybe America needs to go, and confront Russia more. And, I know they have nuclear bombs and stuff and a pretty major conventional armory as well. But, maybe it's time for us to start really pushing the Russians. The irony is many of these people that are saying this are of the age group that during the 1960s, they were like, hey, peace, man, no war, no war. And now they've got positions of power where all of a sudden it's like, the weapons are on our side. It's not Nixon anymore. We got the weapons. Now I like to see things blow up. Okay? This is something that's really ironic and I'd say very dangerous. But if we take a look, the wording of all the stories about Putin and Russia in reference to what's going on in Syria, there's terms like aggressor being used about the Russians. And usually these terms are, there's always different ways you can say a word. You can say lust or infatuation. Okay? If you say lust, it implies that it's unworthy. It's kind of like base and animalistic. If you say infatuation, which means kind of the same thing, it means maybe that there's this kind of, Pippi Le Pew type thing towards the cat with the little stripe down the back or something like that. But it has a little bit more positive context. And the same you say for leadership and manipulation. The two words mean the same thing. Leadership and manipulation mean the same thing. Look it up. But depending on what words you used, so-and-so is a great manipulator, or so-and-so is a great leader. Okay? Usually it is going to be based on the writer's impression of that person, socially or politically. Now, you take a look at the words that are used about Russia. Everything's about Russia being the bad guy. Okay? You'd think that you were talking about Nazi Germany. Oh, wait a minute. Hillary's already likened Putin to Hitler. But the thing is, I don't think the Russian people would agree that they're anything close to being Nazi Germany. In fact, it was the Russians who actually put up most of the men who died to fight the Nazis. And, I've been to Russia many times. It's not a Nazistic society, believe me. But, you would think that the Russians are the worst people on the face of the earth. And that Putin's like the bloodthirsty Dr. Evil type person just sitting back and trying to find ways to bring mayhem across the world if you read the media. Terms like aggressor, confrontational, obstacle, like obstacle to peace. Defiance, well, he's defying what the United States wants, but he's still using that word defiance implies like a child who's going against their parents. And usually we side with the parents. We figure that the child doesn't have the abilities to make decisions on their own. So when you use the word defiance, like Putin is in defiance of the wishes of the U.S. State Department, all of a sudden that still puts people don't read that like, oh, well, let's see, there's two sides here. I wonder what they are. No, it puts Putin as the mean guy, the bad guy, the one who wants to cause problems. All right? This is very evident. And, people are starting to kind of wise up to this. And, with the Trump thing, oh my gosh, it's even worse. Putin's nothing. If you've got Hitler here and Putin's worse than Hitler, then all of a sudden you've got Trump that must be even worse. Okay? He must be like something like those old Buck Rogers serials or something like that with Ming the Merciless. Was it Trump the Merciless? You'd think so if you read the headlines. But I just did a little thing. You go into Google and you type in Donald Trump and then you hit news. Okay? Just go in there. Try it. And is there anything written out in the mainstream media positive about Trump? I mean, I kept coming up with words like and headlines that were like RNC distances itself from Trump, or Trump is having a meltdown, or there was quotes from various celebrities or self-proclaimed experts, that Trump must be ashamed or ignorant or hateful or harmful. Okay, these are the headlines that you're reading. I mean, if you had not known anything about U.S. politics or Donald Trump, and you just opened this up, you'd think, oh my gosh, is this some sort of escaped convict who's out there wreaking havoc on the American people? There was things about scandals and Twitter rants. I mean, and that's just today that you'll find those kinds of things. I mean, how can you have a democratic discussion when your source of information out there is so freaking biased, inflammatory, and has a prejudice designed against a particular candidate? I mean, when most of us grew up, if you're like in your 40s or 50s, you grew up with the media being presented like they try to show both sides. They have to be objective. That's not the case anymore. That may have been the case. I mean, even during the Nixon Watergate hearings, there was an attempt by the media to at least show everything in the context of the big picture. Yes, maybe the media didn't like Nixon, but they treated him far better than you're seeing the treatment of Trump. And, we have the scandals when it comes to Trump, but all the stuff that it's kind of ironic, isn't it? That if it has something to do with Hillary, then it's a conspiracy theory. It's not really something that we need to deal with because this is a fringe issue. Hillary doesn't do those things, apparently. Whereas Trump, I mean, the only thing you have to do is say, someone has to come along and say, Trump made fun of me, and all of a sudden it's a front page headline? Is that really fair? I mean, no wonder people are starting to wise up and think, I would encourage this. If your local newspaper, please, if your local newspaper endorses Hillary and rips on Trump, cancel your subscription. Okay? Cancel your subscription. That's the best thing you can do because their advertising dollars are based on this. All right? If you're a newspaper and you start losing subscriptions, and then the people that are selling products through your newspaper who they don't care, they're just trying to sell their, no diapers or energy drink or something like that. If they see there's less and less people reading that newspaper, will demand that the charges for the advertising space go down because obviously if less people are looking at the newspaper, less people are looking at the advertising. Cut your subscriptions. Okay, the internet is so much better to get your information. Sure, you may lose out on some coupons that come out on Sundays. Who cares? Ultimately, this is something that you have to kind of say, you know what? Maybe I can get those ads at the store anyway or something. It's time to really kind of say, forget it to these entities. And a lot of times when I see articles, I got to remember too that if you click on an article, it shows there's a lot of traffic. Wouldn't that be the ultimate irony that all the people that are clicking on articles that are ripping on Trump are actually Trump supporters, and all the articles ripping on Hillary are actually Hillary supporters, and they're just driving up everyone's traffic, and therefore you could say to the advertisers, we want more money for this. Now the thing is, though, you're not going to see a lot of articles praising Trump any more than you're going to see articles praising Putin in the mainstream media. And again, I'm just using that term mainstream media as a reference point. Okay, I don't think it's mainstream anymore because so many people are going away from it. So many people are seeing reality for themselves when they notice that stories about their religion always have to have some sort of negativity involved. When they see that stories about maybe the values they represent are always downgrading those values. I remember growing up, my parents watching news, and they'd be like, something would come on news, and they get really angry. Well, what good is it just yelling at your TV? Just, why bother with an entity? Would you go to a play in which the person putting the play on is mocking your religion, okay? Or they're mocking your family. They're mocking your political stance, or they're mocking your economic stance. You wouldn't do it, would you? You wouldn't go in there and do that. So why do you walk into your living room and watch this stuff that's really making fun and trying to destroy your values? Now, I'm not talking about primetime TV. I'm not going to deal with this in this video or presentation. But what I am saying is that the news itself is, if you take a look at it and you were to weigh it and say, does this story reflect what I believe in? And if you start taking an inventory and figuring out, wait a minute, they're not saying anything except maybe the weather report that I believe in, then why watch it? Turn it off. Go out and go for a bike ride, or go jogging, or spend some extra time with the kids, or go out in social media and start doing something. Set up a blog. Do your own sharing of news articles. Don't just rely on the media to do it. You don't have to turn out that many, just one here or there. You never know who you're going to affect. So anyway, they see reality for themselves. They go to an event, they see an event, political event or something, and then they notice it's not even on the news. And maybe there was 20,000 people that showed up for this event, but yet there's a story about the opponent, and you also read that she had maybe 150 people show up. What does that impression give? Well, you know the truth because you were there. But the people who are just watching it just on television or reading about it in the newspaper, they weren't there, so they have no clue. So the reality becomes, well, I guess they both had these rallies, and I see a number for this one, but not for this one, so therefore this person must really be ahead. And then people like to bet on winners. It's not very good survival strategy to bet on the loser. Okay, this side's losing in the war. I'm going to go join them. The whole underdog thing is nice when it comes to a political discussion or something like that, but it's not so nice when it comes to, taking up arms. So human beings are somewhat conditioned, be it genetics or society or whatever, that we want to go with a winner. So therefore, if you see that your candidate is always the presented in the bad light or being ignored, you might have a significant number of people switch over to the one that seems like the winner or the logical choice. And the media knows that very well. Now, the other thing is being spoken down to. Here's one thing I would like you to do as an experiment. Watch BBC or RT. I know RT is funded by the Russian government, and BBC is funded by the British government. But take a look at how their commentators and news presenters speak to you. They speak to you like you're an educated audience. You're spoken to as if you know what you're talking about. You're spoken to as if you are an equal. Okay? Now watch American media. I would actually say Fox is okay in this regards. They seem to be much better towards their audience, but I don't see it in that much in the other areas, in the other networks. I've seen some where it's almost like you're a school child. I remember one particular story in which someone was talking about Israel bombing Syria, and the way they presented it was almost akin to, the Israelis are the good guys and the Syrians are the bad guys, and Israel went after the bad guys, type of attitude. Okay? And, regardless of how you feel about issues in the Middle East, wouldn't it be much better to explain this as if you're talking to someone that's not with a first or second grade educational level? All right? So the thing is, you need to be able to, if you're watching the news programs and they're talking down to you, then remember, that's how they think of you. They think of you as not being very intelligent. They think of you as being less able to grasp things. Now, there may be some people that say, well, Trump definitely can speak at a much higher level than he does during his rallies. He seems to speak at about a fourth grade level. But he uses language that everyone can understand, but he deals with concepts in a much more advanced way. So therefore, it's not the same thing. If your newscaster, though, is saying, okay, this is what happened today, then that's much different. Okay, that is much different, and maybe it's time to think, no way. I mean, I don't want to listen to this. I just don't want to be insulted. Now, the thing is that there is a growing divide right now when it comes to what people listen to between the various groups and so forth, what they wish to, I should say, entertain themselves with. No, that's more like if you're watching the mainstream media. All the glitz and glamour and all the pretty faces and that sort of thing. By the way, look up how much these people make. Okay, especially if they're like liberals and they're talking about, the plight of poor people and that sort of thing. Well, take a look how much they make. Just look their names up. It's easy. Just go on the internet, put their name in there. How much do they earn a year? You might be kind of surprised in a lot of cases. And that reminds me of one other issue that bugs me. When they start talking about, things are going so much better, when it comes to the economy and stuff like that. Well, yeah, if you're rich, and also if the people you associate with at cocktail parties are rich, then of course things look like they're getting better. The rich don't usually fall down to the level of poor. Okay? The poor the poor have to really struggle to get to middle class. But right now the middle class is struggling tooth and nail just to hang on. I mean, seriously, they are barely hanging on. And the media makes it sound as if, it's okay. Things are going well. We're out of the recession and things are booming. No, they're not. You all know that they're not. You all know what businesses looked like 10 years ago in the United States. You all know how much people are working to try, skipping their vacations because they're so freaking scared of losing their jobs. You know that. But the media tries to tell you, no, things are great. Things are wonderful. Well, this is creating a greater divide. Oh, by the way, I just wanted to say, when Hillary made the comment about Bernie's people being people that living in their mom's basements, maybe Hillary should ask the question, why are people in their 20s having to live in their mom's basements? Okay? There's a lot of people, in fact, I would say the majority of people in their 20s that might be living in their mom's basement or something like that are doing so because they can't find work. But the media makes it sound like, they're just lazy and stuff like that. No, they can't find work. And you all know, whether it's your own kids or it's yourself or people you know that that's the truth. But the media would tell you that that's not the truth. You're not correct. Your perceptions are distorted, not the media's. And this is creating a greater divide in people. Now, I know that Hillary's been really jumping on what she calls the alternative right. And I think ultimately what that means is alternative media in general. So if you're conservative and you're not part of the kind of economic liberalism, the Milton Friedman style of monetarism and so forth, then you must be alternative right. And if you're alternative right, seems like her followers find the absolute worst examples maybe out there. And alternative right can, there's thousands of people that are doing shows just like this. Some of them with millions of people watching, some of them with one person. listening or whatever. But the thing is, you find the very worst and say, oh, well, that's the whole people. That's all of it. But what she means by that, when she says alternative right, she's talking about alternative media in general. And that's very dangerous. Julian Assange has said that there's a real danger if Hillary gets elected, that she will start cutting back on press freedom, and it could be like a new era of McCarthyism. And just the thing is, this is dangerous. But why the establishment, Republican establishment and Democrat establishment, is so scared right now, and the media establishment, which is their mouthpiece, they are so scared, is what you're having is a growing divide. You're having young people, and you're having middle-aged people. And by that I mean, under 60, let's say. They're not living in their mom's basement, as Hillary would say, age, but they are maybe in their 40s or 50s. But many of those 40s and 50s, and definitely the young people, are computer literate. And they're comfortable with the computer, way more comfortable getting their news and information on the computer. And as they explore, they start finding alternative media. And then they start saying, wow, this alternative media treats me as if I'm intelligent. They also give lots more information. And what's really weird is I'm noticing the information's way more correct than what I see in the mainstream media. And so the young and the middle age computer savvy people are turning away. They don't trust the media. Media level trust is way down. Whereas older people and less educated people are more likely to trust the media. And so they stay more loyal to it. Of course, the older people, it's because when they were, coming of age, maybe in the 50s, they could trust the media. At least they believed they could. And, there was certain ethics around the media. And those ethics and trust and so forth don't seem to be apparent to the younger generation. They're like, wait a minute, no. I don't trust them any more when it comes to the news than I do the commercial breaks. In fact, maybe the commercial breaks are more trustworthy than the news itself. So you're seeing this major divide. And within it, both within the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, you're seeing what has become the establishment getting very fearful. In fact, I would say the establishment Republicans and establishment Democrats who, they hang out at the same country clubs, they probably sleep together, eat together, go on, parties together and stuff like this. They're both seeing like the alternative media as being this like populist revolt, something that threatens them. On the left side, you've got the Bernie Sanders people who are saying, we need change, we need to do this. On the right side, they see the type of Trump people saying, we need change, we need to do this. And what's really scary to them is those two groups overlap quite a bit on issues. Maybe there's a little difference when it comes to issues, I don't know, like abortion or gay marriage or something like that. But on other issues, there's a lot in common. And this scares the elite. This scares the people who have been able to trust that, things are going to be stable in the general psyche of the population, that things won't change so much. But now they don't know where people are at. Before it's like, oh yeah, network news, that's the narrative. But now people are going out there and they're learning stuff, and their trust level of media is just plummeting to the ground. That's all the time we have for now.
This is Ozzy Skateboard, and you're listening to UCY.TV.